cost, logistical, and tax advantages, Georgia remains very competitive when it comes to landing economic development projects. Even so, we won't see much relocation to Georgia in 2012. That's because few businesses have enough confidence in the recovery to relocate or expand. And beyond that, housing markets are so weak that businesses are concerned about the costs involved in moving their existing employees. Now, we can mitigate the lack of relocations by encouraging business formation and growth within the state. And we can also be sure that we get our fair share of the relocations that do occur in this economic climate, and we can be ready for the future when relocations become more common again. Due to low business costs and low taxes, Georgia is often shortlisted for many economic development projects, but too often we're unable to do what it takes to close the deal. The Southeast uses incentives for relocation more aggressively than any other part of the country. For example, Tampa recently beat out Atlanta for 500-time winter jobs because Florida offered the most competitive package of state and local incentives. Georgia will have to be more aggressive with respect to offering deal closing incentives for major projects, at least when those projects have good potential for long-term growth. Of course, we also have to make sure that our statutory incentives remain competitive. It's those statutory incentives that get Georgia shortlisted. Georgia also has several strengths that have helped the economy for years and can continue to drive the economy. We need to recognize these strengths and invest in them. Georgia's costs of living and doing business are low partially because we've got a good tax structure. Now still, our tax structure could be improved. We should broaden the base and shift some of the burden towards consumption and away from income, production, and investment. Another strength that should continue to work for Georgia is our transportation, distribution, and logistics industry. Now, of course, we've all experienced traffic bottlenecks, but that should just remind us that you can't take this transportation strength for granted. We must find new sources of revenue to fund the infrastructure improvements that are so vital to Georgia's economy. Georgia's ports have not only fully recovered from the Great Recession, the incoming data bode well for their expansion this year. But looking beyond 2012, there's reason to be concerned. The Savannah Harbor has the shallowest depth of any major port in the U.S. Now, that hasn't been a serious problem because the constraints in Savannah are similar to the constraints through the Panama Canal. But an expansion of the Panama Canal will be complete in 2014, and that will allow much larger vessels to cross through. Once that happens, you'll see a big increase in the use of these larger ships. So, deepening the Savannah Harbor isn't just about increasing its future economic impact. It's about assuring that the economic benefits don't begin to decline. Now finally, there is a set of economic drivers that are of growing importance, but so far Georgia has not adequately focused on them. So I call these critical weaknesses, and it's something Georgia must address. The Milken Institute ranks Georgia 34th among the states in terms of science and technology capabilities. Now, low ranking should concern us because R&D-based industries such as biotech and nanotech are going to be important drivers of global growth in the 21st century. R&D as a share of Georgia's GDP is less than half the national average. Now, Georgia scores very well with respect to academic R&D, but we don't score well when it comes to R&D funded by businesses or by state agencies. Given the scarcity of R&D activity, it shouldn't be surprising that Georgia doesn't generate as many patents as an average state. Innovation takes money. Georgia desperately needs to develop its venture capital markets. We see only about $1.07 in venture capital per $1,000 of state GDP. To be on par with the nation, we need to nearly double that amount. And about 85% of our venture capital comes to our Georgia companies from firms that are headquartered outside of the state. And that's a problem because the personal connections that enable a company to grow are often made where that capital is coming from. More native venture capital would help with the retention of Georgia companies. Another problem we have is the weakness of the IPO market. Georgia's most promising homegrown companies will find that often the easiest way to grow is to get purchased by a large, well-established company. And unfortunately, those companies are probably going to be located in places like Boston or Silicon Valley, rather than Atlanta and Columbus. Georgia does well when it comes to entrepreneurial activity, but to do well in the future, Georgia needs an adequate supply of venture capital to fuel the growth of our most successful startups. All too often, Georgia births high-tech companies that leave just as they're on the verge of commercial success. And when that happens, Georgia misses out on a big payoff in terms of jobs generated by our talent. We need to combine our entrepreneurial vigor with a workforce that is more highly skilled in science and engineering. So the bottom line is that Georgia can do a much better job of nurturing its innovation and entrepreneurial assets. That will allow us to grow and keep the high-tech companies that create high-paying jobs. We can